Hi, and welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, I want to talk about a comment I received on a previous podcast, and we'll discuss about what is essentially leading up. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about of expansion into the leadership realm because I received a comment about one of my podcasts that was talking about, it was in response to the do technical experts make good leaders, or can they? And this person asked the question, and I'm just going to read it to you. That I listened to your first two podcasts and I had a question for you. When your immediate supervisor lacks qualities that are required for his position, how do you handle it? Let's use an example from my previous job, where a maintenance manager repeatedly fails to plan ahead, everything from scheduling vacation coverage to staying on top of preventative maintenance, right? So he's essentially saying I had a supervisor that had certain responsibilities that was not fulfilling those responsibilities in order to make the organization as a whole successful. And certainly this person successful at their job by making sure they had coverage when people went on vacation, and they had their supply chain in order and scheduling in order for whatever it was that they were doing maintenance on, right? So this is a little bit of outside of the scope of my intention of Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast, because I do firmly believe that the leader is the critical linchpin, is the cornerstone that will affect the most significant change in an organization. And by essentially that top-down mentality, by changing the way that leader does business and that way that leader interacts with his people, connects and inspires his or her people, that will create the most change in an organization. However, I do recognize and completely understand, because I've been in this situation myself personally, that there are situations where you are for lack of a better term, the lower level employee. You're the one without the authority. You're the one that, whether you're punching a time card or anything of that nature, where you're outside of that management realm. Okay, and certainly this is the preponderance of the American workforce right now. And certainly in the military as well. That's a perfect example, right? The enlisted structure is extremely way outnumbers the officer corps. So I want to touch on this real briefly about what is essentially leading up. Okay, so you're not necessarily the leader of your organization, but you need to have those leadership skills in order to influence your leaders that are above you and that have that authority and discretion to make those kind of decisions to impact the organization as a whole. So this was my response to this user. And first of all, I apologize for the late response because I had something going on that day, but I said, I am focused primarily on the leader side of the equation. I think that has the most potential for affecting real change in a workplace. Okay, but to answer your question, it seems apparent the person in that position is woefully inadequate to handle the responsibilities. Okay, it seems pretty obvious to me. They're not doing the things that is required, whether it be managing people, i.e. vacation coverage, or the operations of the organization itself, the supply chain management and the scheduling of the maintenance. Without knowing the overall structure of this particular organization to know exactly what is the best practice to handle such a situation, I will give a general sense of how I think it should be handled. And of course, the short answer is it all depends. It depends on your organization. It depends on the structure that you have in place for management. Do you have a method? Do you have an HR department that you can go to? Do you have somebody above that person that is involved or not? Maybe it's a single operation. You're dealing directly with the owner. If it's a small, auto body shop or something, you're dealing directly with the owner, and they're just woefully inadequate at being able to handle all the things, which begs larger questions of why are they in the business in the first place and how did they get to that level, but we won't concern ourselves with those at this moment. So, all right, I continue. So it depends. Does the organization have a manager supervisor above that person that is also responsible for productivity, or is that manager the sole authority? Okay, so that makes a big difference. Is the lack of planning out of pure laziness, or an overall lack of training / knowledge of how to do their job? Okay, that makes a big difference, because one is intentional, right? They're choosing not to do the job. And the other is maybe they've been placed in a position that they're just not capable of doing because of training, because of education. Okay, well, I won't say it's not their fault, because they should understand the responsibilities of the position in order to rise to that level, to learn those systems, to learn what it takes to make the organization successful. But on the other hand, it's kind of not their fault as well if they were thrown into the fire. But we're going to assume that this person has been in that for some time, and it's probably, and kind of I think what the spirit of this comment is probably out of laziness. This person is just kind of not doing their job, and it's affecting the organization as a whole. Okay, so I continue with my response. So at some point, as an employee who cares about your job and the quality of work that you produce, you, as the employee, have to be willing to stand up and let other people, quote unquote, higher ups, know that the manager in charge is failing at his or her duties. So, right, you need to document and you need to provide a solution and not just a complaint. Okay, so in the case of, not properly scheduling maintenance, you need to document like, hey, we knew this was coming down the pipe and it was not done, or the parts were not ordered that we needed, so now the job is just waiting dead while we wait for parts and all these things, whatever the case may be. You need to be able to document that and show, hey, on Tuesday, this is when this should have been ordered, but it wasn't ordered until Friday, so I sat around for 3 or 4 days finding other work to do, right? And also when you come to, especially if you're going to a higher level, if you're bypassing a manager that's not performing after you've talked to them, okay, let's not underestimate the importance of actually talking to this person, because, and this again goes back to a previous podcast of, are you willing to tell somebody to their face that they're wrong? Do you care enough about your organization, about your future in that organization to do that? And not in a mad way or a sour way, but in a way that is, hey, sir or ma'am, if that's the appropriate term, or hey, John, we've got this coming up. I really need you to order these parts. Or, hey, Jeff's going on vacation next week. We really need to figure out how to handle the workload we've got going minus one person. Okay, you need to be able to bring that up. And as if you do care about your organization, show that you are the one thinking ahead, you are the one planning ahead and bringing that up. Now, if that goes completely unresponsive, then yes, you do have an obligation, again, if you care about your organization and the future of your job there, to take that to your higher ups and say, hey, I brought this to, Manager Joe's attention and he still hasn't done anything about it. We're setting up for failure coming up here. And oh, by the way, this has happened multiple times here and here and here and here. Okay, so not just a complaint though. It is always best practice to have a solution, and maybe that solution shouldn't necessarily directly be fire Manager Joe, because that probably won't endear you very well to the organization overall. But it could be subtle hints of, hey, has Manager Joe been to CHR? Has he gotten an HR briefing of how to write performance reports, the timelines and when those are due, because those affect my pay raises and performance reviews? Has Manager Joe been to this certification class to know supply chain management? And of course, I'm speaking in this kind of specific example of a maintenance world, which is heavily dependent on supply chain management. But you can apply this to any organization, whether it be a law firm, right? Like, hey, he's forgetting that this so-and-so's got these courses they have to do for their continuing education or their bar exam, or these court dates are coming up, and X, Y, and Z. You can just fill in the blanks as appropriate for your organization. So the importance is to bring a solution with that, like how, based on if it's pure laziness or lack of training or education, how you think that could handle. You're like, hey, senior manager Rick, how about you come down and just kind of see how things are run, if that's the case, if that's an opportunity that they can do and actually see firsthand, like instead of being hands off, if that's the type of structure you have. So I just kind of finish it up. Like, I know this isn't very specific, and we can certainly get into specifics. If you shoot me a specific question, I will do my best to answer it as best as I think should be handled as a leadership focused type of a podcast, and my mentality is certainly focused on that. But the short answer is yes, it certainly depends, but the general answer is document, confront, and provide a solution. Okay, and whether that is directly with the person that's failing or that you see as failing, and maybe you don't have all the information as well, give that little bit of benefit of the doubt that you're missing something, and maybe certainly they've got other things going on, that you don't know about. Who knows what the case may be? Just don't always assume that it's out of negligence or malice, whether it be laziness or otherwise. Okay. So I want you to really kind of get thinking about that. And like I said at the beginning, this is really a case of leading up, right? So you're at that I don't want to say bottom level, but you're at that entry level or that kind of worker level without the authority, without the power in the organization. But you need to influence your supervisors and managers and leaders above you, whether it be the owner, CEO, mid-level managers, whatever the case may be, and how to do that appropriately. Certainly not being the thorn in somebody's side is probably not the best long-term solution. That might be a short-term solution, but this all comes back to as well as how much are you invested in this organization, and is this the type of organization, do you want to be a part of, right? Have the leaders created a culture that you want to be in, especially long-term, if we're talking career level type stuff, and 2, do they value you as an employee enough to give you the resources to be successful? And again, this goes all back to why I'm focusing on those leaders in order to do that, to create employees that want to be there, to create employees that are connected to the workplace, their goals align with each other, and it's a mutually beneficial situation, right? And everything's more productive and growth and all those great things that go along with a happy workplace. So I hope that was helpful for you today. I appreciate the comment on the podcast, and I welcome them. I will try to get back to them as much and as I'm able to. And certainly the ones that are important like this, I think make great discussions on the podcast. If you have alternate thoughts or additional suggestions, please make sure and comment, whether it be on my Facebook, LinkedIn, or any other platform. I have added the podcast to a bunch of new platforms, so hopefully I catch you on your favorite platform for listening to podcasts. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please shoot me a message at Kale@KaleHouserLeadership.com, and be sure to visit KaleHouserLeadership.com to get your amazing free gift. Hey, thank you so much for joining me today. No matter where you are at in the world, I hope you have a fantastic afternoon. Bye.